Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Ash Perrow, and he's in Australia, and his near-death experience was just November 2016. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so start where you like and take as long as you like.
Thank you, Peggy. So in November 2016, I went into a hospital for a back operation and I had ruptured a couple of discs a year and a half earlier surfing. And I tried natural ways of repairing my body and my disc just kept getting worse and worse. And so, effectively, I was in level 10 nerve pain, and it was to the point I couldn't do my shoes. I was on opioids for about 6 months leading up to the surgery, and I just had to surrender and go in for surgery. And then during the surgery, the surgeons, as they were working on fusing my spine, they because my discs in my back had deteriorated so much, they had to pull out the little fragments and they moved the vein to the side so they could pull out the fragments of the disc. And what happened was when they did that, the vein tore in my groin. And so they were unaware. So they were operating in my abdomen area. And a very interesting way of doing spinal surgery. They go in through the front and take out your intestines and this crazy way so that
Oh,
they don't damage nerves, right? Because if they go in the back, they can damage your nerves. And so it was a very delicate operation, but they tore the vein down in my groin and they weren't aware of that. And that was because of the pressure created on the vein as they moved it to the side. And veins are like tissue paper. They're very, very fragile. And so they stitched me back up, sent me back to the ward. And during the night, I was in a lot of pain. And I kept telling the nurses, I'm in a lot of pain. They said, that's okay. Keep pressing the fentanyl button. It refreshes every 10 minutes. And so I had a very, very painful, restless night. And then in the morning, the physio came in around 10 a.m. and he said, okay, let's get you up. We'll get your exercises going. It's great for the body to start rehabbing straight away. And I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked down at my thigh and it was about twice the size that it normally is. And I said to the physio, my leg's not normally like this. And he said, oh, you'll be okay. We'll just get you up. We'll get you moving. And so I stood up and instantly I collapsed back down on the bed. He must have assessed that I was in real trouble because I was having difficulty breathing. And he hit the red emergency button, and the medical team very, very quickly came in. I could hear the alarm ringing. And later on, I realized that alarm rings through the whole ward. And so they came in very quickly, put the oxygen mask on me. They were trying to attach the ECG monitors, but I was just bathed in this cold sweat. My whole body had just released this cold sweat. And they were saying, oh, he's covered in sweat. The monitors aren't attaching. And I remember someone saying, keep trying. And I was very aware of what was happening to me and where everybody was in the room, what they were saying. And my initial thoughts was, I'm okay. We'll be okay. We'll get through this. And they got the monitors attached, and I could hear them talking about my blood pressure. And they said, we don't have a pulse. He's not breathing. And I'm there. And at that point, I said, get my partner, call my partner. And I saw somebody that was sort of at the foot of my bed run out of the room. And there was also somebody to the right of my bed who was just standing there taking notes. And the physio was standing in the left-hand corner of the room looking petrified. And the there was this deep awareness of what's happening right now. Okay. And then they were saying, stay awake, keep your eyes open, Ash. And I was trying really hard just to stay there and keep my eyes open. And it was like things were very slippery. It was like trying to stay awake was just like really difficult. And it's like I was really struggling to hold on to that. And I heard them say his blood pressure is 52 on 36. And I thought, oh, I'm in real trouble here. And I had this truth bomb, right? This insight. It's like, oh, I'm dying. This is dying. I'm dying right now. And then as I was just about to sort of go to the other side or fade out, right? Like for me, my experience was I faded to black. Right. I had this immense sadness that it was just so deep. And I thought, no one I love is here with me. I'm dying and no one I love is here. And then and just before I blacked out, I looked at the physio and I just thought, you poor guy, you think you've killed me. And he was just so petrified. He's so young. He was very young.
Mm.
And that's when I blacked out, except there was this surprising thing that I became these ripples just heading out infinitely in all directions. And I was very surprised. I had this preconception that when I die, I would become this sort of enlightened Buddha, right? I don't know where I got it from. Probably from previously having read Anita Mojani's book and seeing Anita Mojani speak and the way that she came back to living. And but my experience was I had this deep sensation of just being myself. It was like there was this true essence, which many conscious people talk about the true essence of ourselves. I experienced that. And I also had conscious awareness. So I was very surprised that I was able to think. And as these ripples, there was no separation. I was the ripples were me. And I just kept going out and out and out and out and in all directions. And I started to say, I want to stay. And I started to go through the people that I wanted to stay for. So I wanted to stay for the kids, and I was in a blended family at that point. I wanted to stay for my partner, and the ripples were still just going out and out and out. And then I had this experience where this warmth came over me, and I said, I want to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. The instant that I expressed that, straight back into my body, I opened my eyes. I heard the emergency team say, he's awake, he has a pulse, he's breathing. And I had level 11 pain, excruciating pain. I started moaning and screaming because the pain was so large. And it was, later on they told me it was because I'd lost so much blood, it was pressing on my organs, and that was causing the immense pain. So I came straight back into just huge amounts of pain, but also gratitude. I'm alive. I'm alive. And then they took me down to the depths of the hospital. I remember them rushing me through the corridors and down the lift, and they were really short with someone, get out of the way. And someone jumped out of the way of the lift, and they got me in and scanned, and then I'd end up in ICU. And from there, from that experience, there was just such a change in me. It was like, life before my NDE had been very challenging. I was doing my best, but it was very challenging. And so there were so many lessons that were either taught to me in a download that the moment I said I want to stay for the work that I do, or that have happened since. And it's been, for me, this contract. There was a contract that happened because I said I want to stay for the work that I do and walk the planet from my heart. And the contract is to live from my heart. And so they started these explorations. How do I live from my heart? What does it mean to live from my heart? What's this, inverted commas, for people that are just listening? What is this work that I am here to do? And so it's been 8 years of this amazing exploration into those questions. How do I live from my heart? What is the work?
So what did they do? Rush you back into surgery and repair that before ICU?
No, no. So
Oh,
just straight to ICU
oh,
because the they weren't sure where the blood loss was coming from. They didn't want to give me blood thinners because, well, sorry, this is going fast forward a bit. So a few days later, I started to blood clot and a very, very severe blood clot. The clot went from my abdomen down to my ankle in one vein. Um, but yes, they knew I was stabilized. And so they started doing blood transfusions. And basically, their strategy at that stage was let's keep putting blood back into him until his blood pressure stabilizes. Eventually, they put almost 3 liters back in. So to quantify that, that's about half my blood. And I developed a very large hematoma about the size of a baseball in my abdomen. And so a
oh.
hematoma is congealed hard blood. And that hematoma took over 6 months to break down in my body. Um, yes, so it wasn't coming back to healing. Well, it was, but it was lots of suffering. And so fundamentally, even this, there was a point in the ICU where I was laying there, and I remember saying to the nurse, "I'm so grateful to know this level of suffering. I could have gone my whole life and not knowing this level of suffering." And for me, there was this element where I was connected to people whose level of suffering was like that every day, and just this empathy, like, oh gosh, there's people out there that are suffering like this every day, day after day after day after day. I'm so grateful to know what their suffering is like. And that was extraordinary. I'd never had that experience before.
And to want to come back and come back, I mean, that's a lot to process.
Yeah. And the realization, like laying in ICU, was, oh, I haven't been living from my heart. I now I can look back and go, well, I was a people pleaser. I was living out of obligation and trying to take care of everybody else, putting myself last all the time. And this pattern of taking care of everyone else, doing things to please people, and my energy was very low. There was a history of PTSD and adrenal fatigue and depression for 7 years. And life had just been really hard. And even though I was a kind person and trying to work life out and doing my best, I wasn't living from my heart. And so for me, it's like, okay, I wouldn't listen to those little voices in my head that were saying, this relationship's no good for you. You've got to get out of it. And incidentally, that relationship, 2 weeks after I got out of hospital, we split up. It was like the universe went, okay, clean slate. You're starting from virtually zero health. Your relationship is gone. You're going to move out from the home. Your daughter's going to go with you. You're going to have virtually no belongings, and you're going to recreate your life.
It's so common for divorces and breakups like that after a near-death experience. It seems
Yeah,
like
yeah,
once we've been in that place and we know, like you call it true self, um, it seems like we can't go back to who we used to be once we've realized these things that we realized from the experience.
yeah. And it was a bit like trying to stay awake before I passed over to the other side. It was like it just slipped through our fingers. It was like, this is inevitable. This breakup is inevitable. There's no way that you guys are going to stay together. And even though we cared about each other, it had been very challenging for at least a few years. And the universe was like, no, no, no. Your time together is over. It's time to move on. So that was really, really challenging. But I think about these kind of experiences, and not just near-death experiences, but significant experiences in our lives, that with the relationships, it's either going to make them stronger or it's going to make them fall apart. And for us, that near-death experience, it didn't make our relationship stronger. It actually accelerated the falling apart.
Yeah. I was 25 with my second NDE, and I was from internal bleeding from an ectopic pregnancy. So I understand that
Mm.
feeling
Yeah.
of these. I was gone really quickly, but yeah, I had the same thing as quietly to myself, thinking something needed to change.
Yeah.
That I
Mm.
wasn't speaking up. I wasn't being me. I was just being quiet. I had PTSD too, which I didn't know that at the time. And I wasn't talking about any of that. And it felt like when I was on the other side, like I didn't really live. I didn't make a difference. I didn't speak
Mm.
up. And so when I come back, it was gradual over time. I started thinking, I was out of high school 10 years and decided I was 28 to go to college. I've been out of high school 10 years and just started realizing what I wanted to do and what I needed to do and how my ex, it just wasn't a good thing. And I started taking life more seriously and all those things that come with it, which I didn't know in near death experience back then, was the cause or that brought me to this probably. But yeah, I understand completely.
Mm. Yeah, it's extraordinary how hard those choices seem before we make them around, okay, things have to change. And the universe always provides the change. It's like, oh, I don't know what the next step is. And the universe will be like, okay, here it is. Be it through suffering or be it through this moment of inspiration or insight. But it's like, ah, and at the time, the choices seem so challenging. It's a bit like exercising, forcing oneself to exercise or to eat well. Or at the time, it seems hard to make the change. But afterwards, I can't believe I didn't make those changes earlier.
But at least you already knew what a near-death experience was, that you had
Mm,
some clue. Where mine was in 1986, there wasn't no such thing. So in my world,
yeah. Yeah. And I had a lot of doubt afterwards, right? Like there was this experiential knowing that something something extraordinary occurred. And for some reason, billions of people die, and I was able to come back. I was permitted, I was allowed. And for me, I very much question. It's like, okay, maybe I just fainted. And I sort of sat with that for a couple of months. And then I thought, well, if I just fainted, how was I able to think? How was that possible? There's been nothing like that. And then people say, well, it was just the brain starting to die, and there was a DMT release, which quite possibly could be. But for me, I've experienced DMT in other forms in plant medicine. So part following my near-death experience, it took a few years to build momentum, but there was this question like, well, what is consciousness? What does that mean? And so that led down to experiencing plant medicines and trying to understand the nature of consciousness more. Um, but that question really, so if for a lot of people, it's the pictures in our head of what we want drives our questions, and then our questions drive our behavior. So me going, okay, how do I live from my heart? What's the work? That drove my choices and my behavior. So I said, oh, okay. So my new way of living is to live from the heart, right? The true heart. What does that even mean? And that led me into this exploration around, okay, there's this, and there's a retreat. They run it in the States too. It's run in 20 countries around the world. It's in the States they run it in Colorado, and it's in places like Italy, the UK. I believe it's in Mexico. It's in Australia, Bali. They do it India, and it's called the Path of Love, and it's this 7 week process. And I had done 7 weeks, 7 day process. Apologies, and I had done a 2 day experience twice actually, and I actually did this. So they have a 2 day experience called the Awakening of Love, which they offer every now and then. And I did the Awakening of Love the weekend before my near death experience, right?
oh,
And I had already done the Awakening of Love weekend once before, and it was profound, so profound. And I thought, so the weekend before surgery, um, a friend of mine came with me, right? One day, this friend of mine, we were having a birthday party for one of the kids, and he hopped out of the car with his wife, and I could tell something had been going on between them, right? Like you could just tell, like their energy was very low, and I said to his wife, "Is he okay?" His name's Matt, and I said, "Is Matt okay?" And Karen said, no, he's not. And I said, don't worry, I'll have a chat to him. I've got him, right? And so I talked to Matt and I said, okay, you need to come to the Awakening of Love weekend with me. So we went, and coming out of that, he was so inspired, and it was like our lives went different trajectories. So he came out and life just blossomed and it was amazing. I came out, went into surgery. Poof, the universe just gave me the biggest cup of suffering that I could possibly imagine. And extraordinary how those little things happen. But because I'd experienced the awakening of love and had this desire to do the path of love, which is the week-long retreat, I thought that's where I'm going to go. That's where I'm going to go to learn how to live from my heart. And it was very, it's it's not a cheap retreat, but it's just profound. And I haven't found any work like it anywhere else that I've done work. And I've done a lot of personal work in the last 8 years. And from that experience of going the path of love, it's like, okay, I really connected with what it means to live from my heart. And so then came the integration, right? Like we can have these insights, but then there's the integration. How do you integrate that? And that's the infiniteness. It's like there's so many ways that we can navigate life. And it's like, okay, we really do have this lens where we are the creators in our life. And we those little choices from anything from what time I choose to get out of bed and what I choose to do after I get out of bed to what is it I want to do with my life. Those choices, they all impact. And that's for me, when we feel stuck and we go into victim mode or I don't know, right? It's just like, okay, what's what are the smallest choices we can make that are aligned to how we want to live? Just okay, what time are you going to go to bed? What are you going to watch on your phone? Right. So for a personal example, this morning I hopped up and like I have quite active social media and so I thought, oh, okay, I'll check my social media. Normally I go for a walk as soon as I get up. Right. And then 45 minutes later, I've checked my emails and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, actually, that's not how I want to start my day.
Mhm.
And so that little choice is like, okay, come back to alignment. So went for a walk, had a beautiful breakfast, and here we are chatting now. And those little choices, they create the reality. And we all have different ways of being in our reality that's connected to who we are and how we want to be in the world. However, from our human upbringing, right, and our schooling, our peers, our parents, our grandparents, our media influences, they can take us away from really believing in ourselves and trusting ourselves. They can also direct us to that, right? And you can see that with like Wayne Dyer would call them self-actualized people, right? Which comes from Maslow. These self-actualized people. That some of them have arrived this way with this amazing connection to who they are and strength connection to their inner strength. Others, we have to feel that total helplessness to come back to our inner strength.
Yeah. Total helplessness. And
Yeah, yeah,
because that's how you felt laying there with the,
yeah. I yeah, there was one point where I just thought, I'm just a lump of meat laying on the bed right here. That's all I am. And all I had was my breath and my awareness. I couldn't physically move. The nurses had to move my legs for me. And I was just laying there, breath in, breath out.
and it's so strange because, ever since we're old enough to understand death as children, we always wonder when that day will be, what will happen, what will it be like? And then when those moments come, like, oh, right now, like this is happening right now, and we just don't process. It's just like it's too much for us to comprehend in the moment what
It's so true.
this is happening.
Yeah, it's so true, Peggy.
And then it seems like it's delayed reactions afterwards. Like, that's what happened? Is this what happened? How do I feel about what happened? And all those questions, like how am I here? Other people died from this, or why am I back? What made me come back? Just the processing is crazy.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Peggy, is my computer seems to be playing up at this end.
Freezing up a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's very hot here today,
Is
as
it?
in about 100 degrees in your,
Oh,
and my I can see my computer's overheating. Just give me a second just to fix it up. I'm sorry about that.
that's okay.
Sorry, Peggy. Let me have a look here.
Maybe
Yeah, I
it's
was
not,
having this problem a couple of months ago, but it's been fine before like it's been running fine, but yeah,
maybe
it
it's
must
my
be the
internet
heat
too.
today.
It could be on my end.
Yeah, no, I think it's mine just because I know that it does this. Um, let's see if we can get that back down to a manageable heat. Okay. All right. Looks like we're back. Oh,
Okay.
thank you, Peggy.
So was there anything else you wanted to add or um
Um, we could explore the impact on my life since then, if you wanted to. But as far as the near-death experience, it's like it just impacts so many aspects of my life now because I've I have these questions, right? So it totally reframed how I live in the world. Before that, it was like, how do I make everybody else okay? Yeah, which led to the martyr, led to the person that was putting themselves last. And of course, now I can see that me being the most vital, energized, happy version of myself helps everybody else. You know, that our purpose. So people will often ask, well, what's my purpose? And for me, the purpose is a feeling, and that feeling is of ourselves and experiencing ourselves in our fullness in the work that we do or the life that we live. And so the key to that for me was learning to honor myself. And so that's what I help people do now is teach them how to walk from their heart and connect to their own guidance and their intuition, as well as the kind of actions that help them live from their heart.
how do you do
It's
that?
it's
You have
beautiful.
teach classes
Mhm.
or online?
Yeah, so I coach. So at the moment, one-to-one coaching later on this year, actually very soon, probably in the next 6 weeks, it's also helping therapists and heart-based leaders to share themselves with the world and do their work because part of my experience was that so with my post-NDE, I became very connected to my inner guidance. Right. It was like, people can call it psychic powers or whatever it might be. But for me, it's like, oh, okay. I have a deeper understanding now of what it means to communicate with these entities that help us. And so for me, it's teaching people that inner guidance for themselves and connecting to their trust. So I do that one-to-one groups. So, but also with therapists and heart-based leaders because that's my guidance. Right. It's like for the last 5 years, I've been coaching and getting my message out there. And the guidance has told me, you need to share this story about your NDE. I haven't understood why, right? Because I would love to just kind of hide away and not have to. Well, it's a choice, right? I don't have to do these podcasts, but that's the guidance. And so for me, I used to not listen to my guidance. Now I do my best to listen to my guidance and also is to break down those constructs that they have around from their conditioning and things like that so they can do that themselves.
Okay. It didn't pick up that last sentence. It was just, I don't know why. It's like I said,
Yeah. Um, I'm not sure what to do about this, Peggy. Hmm. I'll just turn my video off. Yeah, I'm not sure what to do. I'm sorry.
that's okay. As long as people hear you. I mean, do you
Yep.
think that that inner guidance is because you felt that during your NDE? There was some guidance there
I
that you,
think in my I think in my NDE, my experience was that it was like I was connecting with my own soul. And my soul was like, now you get it. You had so many opportunities to change your life and listen to your intuition. Even the back injury, that came about through me not listening. And so I'd been a surfer for 25 years and surfed most days in my life in that 25 years. And I'd been on holiday towards the end of the holiday, my back started getting sore. And one particular morning, the surf was amazing. And there was nobody around. I was looking at the surf and I was like, okay, I'm going out. And I literally heard this voice in my head. It was like the voice of God. It was like this deep resonance. And it said, if you go surfing today, you're going to hurt your back. And I was in a job that I wasn't very happy in. And I literally, in my mind, said, bring it on. And so I went and grabbed my board and I started paddling out and I dove through the first wave and the surf was quite big. I dove through the first wave, things were fine, kept paddling, and then another big wave came. I dove through that one with my board. And as I was doing that, that's when I popped two discs in my back. And so it was excruciating pain, excruciating. And it was, I couldn't even, I had to paddle back in with one arm. And so when I got to the shore, I was standing there in just about knee deep water and the waves were coming through, but I couldn't walk. I couldn't even take a step and I was stuck. And so somebody came down, helped me get up to the beach, etc. And what happened from that? I ended up having back surgery. How did I get in that place? By not changing my job, right? I created this back injury surfing so that I didn't have to go back to work. And for me, I opened up this, like me saying, bring it on. I think my soul or whatever, force is out there, God, whatever you'd like to call it. It was like, okay, this is the lifetime that you are going to wake up. Let's go. Let's go. And it was like this cascade of events that I couldn't stop. I was doing my best. I couldn't stop these cascade of events because I wouldn't listen to myself and back myself to make the changes that I knew I wanted to make.
So what was your job before the coaching?
So I was a school teacher. And so from my second year of teaching, I didn't want to teach. I started teaching because I love the kids. I really love the kids. But in that education system, I just felt so powerless to help the kids that really needed help. And I'm much more aware of it now, but my nature is freedom. I love freedom. I love the work that I do because there's freedom in it for me, which helps and which equips me to teach others. And I was a musician too, and so there were periods of time where I left teaching and I just was a professional musician, but I just wouldn't leave it for good. I just wouldn't leave it for good. And so 5 years ago, I went, okay, I'm out. I'm going to go be a professional musician, travel the world, play music. And so that was January 2020. Started booking gigs. 6 weeks later, all of them gone. COVID happened, gigs gone, everything gone. And that led me to becoming a coach, funnily enough. That was the path of just surrendering. Go, okay, well, this is the situation now. And I still lived that dream of being a professional musician coming out of COVID. I was still what happened was I as we had our first, so Australia, one of the most locked down countries in the world for a few years, literally 2 years. One of the states in Australia was locked down for almost 2 years. But for me, what happened was that we had our first lockdown, and the a friend rang me up and he said, I'm putting musicians in shopping centers and they're busking all through these shopping centers because there weren't any venues open to go play music. And he said, they're making extraordinary money. People are so happy to hear live music. And so I loaded up my car and drove 10 hours to where he was booking musicians. And I spent 3 months doing that in that particular state. And then I spent the next 6 months traveling around Australia to places that weren't locked down and busking. And so I got to experience that life. But and I spent a few years doing that. And by the end of that, 2 years living that kind of lifestyle. And by the end, I was exhausted. I was like, okay, it's time for being at home. And that led to coaching.
It would be cool if you could find a way to mesh the coaching with the music.
Yes, and I did that for a while too. So I was working with creatives, helping creatives get their messages out there and work through their own personal blocks around being seen and their inner critic. Actually, there's still the free inner critic quiz, which is up on my website link that people can do. And so they can go do this short quiz, takes about 3 minutes, but it helps them identify what's blocking them. So is it perfectionism? Is it self-sabotage? And then it also teaches them around how our inner critic works. Like, why do we have this inner critic? And we can go into that if you like, but uh, would you like to explore that?
Yes, actually, I have talked to a couple NDEers recently, in this last month about the inner critic. Maybe not calling it by those words, but yeah.
Yeah. So, a lot of people would be like, why am I mean to myself? Why do I hold myself back? Why do I have negative self-talk, right? These are all features of the inner critic. And so for me, the inner critic is a protection system. Yeah. And so as humans evolved, we evolved in communities. If we weren't in a community, we were on our own, we were much more likely to die, be it in the desert or the jungle or whatever environment we were. And in a community, we were able to hunt. So it was crucial that the community had a cohesion. So how did that occur? Well, that occurred through the structures in our brain keeping us in the tribe. So crucial for the survival of humanity that we stayed in a tribe. So that meant like this tribal thinking, meaning that we needed to be worried about what other people thought. Yeah. If we were breaking the patterns of the tribe, we'd either feel vulnerable or courageous. And so when we were feeling vulnerable or when we were feeling courageous, that's when the inner critic would kick in, right? It's like, oh, be safe, be safe. Didn't matter if we weren't safe in the environment we were in, right? Like there's lots of research around abused children. They still want to be with their parents. They
Mhm.
still want to be in that home wherever they are because there's something in there in our primal structure that holds us in there. And so it's like developing the awareness of how this structure works, how it holds us, and then outsmarting it. All right. So it's like that. There's this beautiful pattern, this framework that I have, which is called the confident you steps. I'm just holding it up to the screen there. And so the first step is that we know ourselves, right? So we learn about ourselves and then we can be ourselves, right? So it's like we learn things about ourselves, we get an insight about ourselves, we test ourselves out in the world. And as we're testing ourselves out, that's backing ourselves. We try new things. And the more we back ourselves, the more we learn about ourselves. So that's like this evolutionary process. And so the more that we learn about ourselves, the more we can be ourselves, and the more we can back ourselves, and the more we be ourselves and back ourselves, the more we learn about ourselves. So it creates this cycle of growth and creativity and evolution and development in our lives so that we can be thriving and also learn the gift of ourselves and love ourselves.
Yeah. I have been noticing there's a difference between being yourself and doing work that you think is yourself. Like I may do all this, for service to help others and stuff. And I think that's being myself. But then you can realize you are actually feeding an expectation you put on yourself, and that your true self really wants to withdraw and be alone.
Yeah, and sometimes it's confusing. And so one of the strategies is that the inner critic, it's harsh, it's judgmental, it's impatient, right? Whereas the true self, kind, compassionate, loving, generous, supportive. And so, just a simple strategy is just to journal, right? And if the voice is harsh, that's your inner critic. It's trying to protect you. If the voice is that gentle, compassionate, loving voice, that's your true self guiding you. It's like, okay, come this way.
I wonder if that was your critic when yourself was saying, "Oh, you just fainted. That couldn't have been, what you think it is."
Yeah,
Is
well, see,
that,
and yeah, I would say that that was my rational mind trying to make sense of what happened. And I've had many people say, well, you should have sued the hospital. Um, I didn't because my experience was that had to happen. It was inevitable. There were so many things that just went wrong over those couple of years to lead me to that point. It had to happen for my awakening. I'm not going to sue them for facilitating my awakening. Um, so my rational mind was like, trying to find how did that happen? And I remember mentioning to the doctor about it, and he said, "Oh yes, you gave us a fright, but we always knew you were going to be okay." And then I spoke to a friend of mine who had worked in emergency for years, and he said, his words, not mine, he was like, "Dude, you went as close as anybody could possibly go." So, what I came to do was just trust my experience. Okay, this was the experience I had. I'm not going to go seek outside reasons. I'm just going to trust that I had that experience, and then trust that if I have that lens, it's going to have a positive impact on my life.
So did you start talking about this right away?
No,
Explain what happened.
no, no. It it was actually quite a while before I started. And when I was started coaching, I had this amazing coach that I was working with who, he was one of the first coaches in Australia, this beautiful man, and he had retired and I was his only client. It was just, synchronicity that I ended up that he was like, okay, I said to a friend of mine who was a coach, I'm looking for a coach. He said, actually, I think this man would be a wonderful fit for you. And so his name is Bernie, and we've become really great friends. But he said, okay, I want you to create a website. And on the website, I want you to tell your near-death experience story. I want you to make a video. And I was just in resistance. I was like, I don't want to do that. And over a period of a couple of months, we would meet every week, and he would say, "What's happening with the video? What's happening with the video?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's coming. I've just got to get the right lights. I've ordered a camera. I'm waiting for the right camera. All these kind of things." And eventually, I did it. And the only way I could have it on my website was to put it on YouTube. And so I just, recorded it in one take. I think it's maybe a 12 or 13-minute video, put it up on YouTube, put it on my website. And then all of a sudden I started getting these messages and these emails, and people asked me to be on podcasts. And from there I was getting clients. And I just thought, wow, okay. I listened to the guidance around this is your next step, even though I had so much resistance and I didn't want to be seen. But that's not my path in this lifetime. My guidance is be seen, communicate, take these challenges, right? There's a difference between suffering and challenge. Yeah, challenge is that I have power to navigate what's with me. Suffering is I'm choosing not to access my power. And so my experience is the universe is going to turn up my suffering. That's how my soul is communicating with me. Hey, Ash, you haven't done this yet. Here, let's give you a bit of suffering.
I started mine when another guy, he was a pastor, I had met a friend online, and he said, "Well, let's start our own NDE organization. To heck with this other one that didn't want Christians in it. Let's start our own." And I have a lawyer friend, and he's going to write it all up, and he's just going to take care of it all, and then have me do the interview part and stuff. And he was going to do the business end. And I was so excited. And then he comes back and says, that basically his wife was going to take credit for everything. And they want to do it this way and that way. And I'm like, well, no. And there was no lawyer friend at all. And it's like so much was not happening. And so I was so excited about this. And now I'm so disappointed it wasn't going to happen. And so I got so mad. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this on my own. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to figure out how to, the whole Zoom thing I didn't know, the whole YouTube thing didn't know. And so I'm going to make it a business. So I formed a nonprofit first, and then I started the YouTube, and then I had to learn Zoom and all these things. And I didn't watch other YouTube channels to see how to do this, which I should have. I
Hmm.
just started doing it, and I learned as I went. But it came from that
Yeah,
anger of disappointment, something that fell through that I don't know that I would have thought of it on my own if that hadn't happened.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting how the universe works in that way. So, okay. the whispers. Got to listen to the whispers, and if they aren't, then it's going to become this experience that is guiding you towards making a beautiful NDE channel. And we don't have to know the answers. It's like no one was an expert at the beginning of their journey.
And I didn't
We
even know people made money off of it. I didn't know that.
hmm
And then I said, then it started talking about when, made my channel about monetization and then how many subscribers you had to have, how many views before you got monetized. And still I didn't know what monetization, what kind of money, how do you get paid? What do you get paid? I didn't know any of that. I just actually was having a blast with it, talking to other, because
yeah,
it was during COVID when you're home by yourself, nobody to talk to. And now I'm talking to all these into ears all day long. And it was a blast. So.
yeah, yeah. Peggy, you make me think of this book, which is a wonderful book around the consciousness of money. And it's called Love Money, Money Loves You. People can listen to it for free if they have a Spotify account, um, Audible, Amazon, all those kind of things. But one of the key aspects of that book is the more you enjoy yourself, the more money you're going to make.
Yeah,
And
and
it's
then
not
all of a
money's not
sudden,
meant to be this.
yeah,
You
all of
go,
a sudden I started making a lot of money, and I got that, what you say, self-sabotaging thing going on.
hmm.
I backed way off. I was like, that's not me. I'm not a successful person. Nothing works out for me. How'd this suddenly start working out? Now I'm scared because I didn't intend on anything working out like this. It was never my goal. And now that it is, I'm afraid of it. So I just, a
Yeah,
lot of reasons though, my husband's health and stuff, I backed off, but it was like a whole list of reasons, just like I'm backing off. I don't know what's going on. So I just started in the last month. I'm getting back on my channel and I'm not going to be
yeah,
afraid this time of anything.
yeah. Did you find that because often with that people start stepping out, but then they don't have the support structures around them to support them as those inner critic things come up, as those blocks and past experiences. Like I say the past is in front of us. When the past is in front of us, it's very difficult to move forward. So did you find that you got support some way? Was there something that sort of
No,
allowed
I
you to
do
come
everything
back
on
in?
my own. I don't have anybody that helps me with this or anything like that. And I live in the country away from where this stuff is popular. So yes. But and another reason was I had one guy on that I was like, oh wow, look at his, credentials, really impressive. He's been on TV shows and news and this. And I did like 5 more minutes of research on him, and oh, wait a minute, because he was already scheduled to be on that day. I realized he was a liar. He didn't even hold the degrees or any of the positions he said he did. And this guy's going on the news and he's going on TV, and this has been going on for years. He's done this, and nobody cared. I notified some agencies and things and verified, that because he used to be an investigator, right? So it wasn't too
Hmm.
hard. And so I was honest with him, let him know that I'm not going to have you on, and this is why. And and that's another reason I got scared because if I had had him on and not done my research, people could have paid for his service when he tells people to go off their medication because he has this like 5-minute cure of like PTSD and anxiety. And I'm like, whoa, people are going to believe me, trust me, and I'm going to have a liar on, and there's people that could be hurt by this. And this is more serious than what I was taking it. I was just enjoying talking to people, and I started realizing this is a huge responsibility. When people say, "Oh, Peggy had this guy on, he's saying this must be true, so I'm going to pay for this service." And what if they go off their medication? And so I got taken it real serious. Like, I need to know people are telling the truth. How do I do that? How do I know who's telling the truth? And to this day, I still can't say, oh, because they're on my show now, that I can tell you they're to tell, because I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. But if I have an inclination, they're not going to be invited. Or if I find out something, they're going to be, I'm going to take away the invitation. I want to do my best to be selective where I wasn't before. Just everybody come on, share your story. And because I start seeing this is a big responsibility, what we're doing.
Hmm.
So, some people don't care. I mean, they'll just, and that's up to them. But, like I said, I'm not going to have people talking about UFOs and their NDEs and those kinds of things. And you have to be true to yourself. At least for me, I do. Doing this, I have to be true to myself, and I have to know what that is before I could go
Yeah,
forward.
yeah, and that's the it's a great example there around being true to yourself and trusting your intuition and also Peggy acknowledging how you're taking care of your audience, right? Like there's this real consideration that you have for your audience and wanting the best for your audience through your channel. Yeah, I think that's a gold level integrity.
You. And my husband's listened to some little bit. He don't listen to all of my stuff very much, but he's listened to a little bit or walked in while I'm talking, and he's told me you've changed to where, I've got back on my channel now who I used to be. He says you're taking like taking everything more to heart and more open and more not sincere, but he said it's a change in me. And I said I feel it too, like when I'm talking to you right now. Like I want to just be open that I don't have all the answers. I don't know who's tell me the truth and who's not. And don't put me on a pedestal. Let's just,
Yeah,
have these guests on and have some serious conversations and try to understand our experiences. That's all we can do because we don't have the
yeah,
science
yeah.
to back us.
hmm No, well, there's more and more science, but our I like to think about melding the Eastern philosophies with the Western. So for me, if we go full Eastern manifestation, everything's okay. You manifest just by relaxing. The Western action, action, action. So I like to combine the two, right? Our manifestation comes from intention and aligned action. That's manifestation. Yeah, and it's like sometimes the action is just to keep our feelers out, like keep listening out for the next guidance, the next step. It could be somebody that comes along, say somebody wants to start a massage business where they help people, they give people therapeutic massages, and then someone mentions, oh, actually, there's clinic space down the road that just became free. And so that's guidance. It's like, okay, the patience, but also balancing that with the action. And I like to talk about how we have three decision centers. There's the mind, there's the heart, and the gut. And so the gut is that instinctual thing, this isn't right. Like sound like you had that experience with that potential guest where this isn't right. There's something not right here. And then the heart, that's the guidance that comes in when we're still, right? That's that loving voice that's very gentle. Hey, come this way, try this. You were born to do this. You were born to experience life. And then the mind, it is the tool, right? So this is a very clear thing that I like to talk about is that the mind is the tool for doing the heart's guidance, right? So in me doing the work that I do and sharing stories, okay, there's I can see this avenue how I can help people with their inner critic. Okay, mind, we need to help people with the inner critic. And so then, for example, there was the free inner critic quiz and the report that goes with that is like, okay, my mind helped create that, right? And so we have time, and what do we do with our time? It's our attention, right? And attention is, we could say action, but it's okay. So the job of my mind is to attend to things. That means focus. So those three decision centers, if we can combine those, that instinctual intelligence of the gut, the guidance of the heart, and the mind as a tool, then we will be creating what we want in our life. And it becomes this nice, effortless flow.
Have you heard this YouTube? This guy is called Hiren.
No.
Okay, I'm going to send it to you. Um, it was come out a couple years ago, and I just listened to it again the other day. It's the most fascinating. This guy was like a top of his game musician, and all of a sudden he got this illness, and this illness just has really taken over his life. This depression and so it starts out. He's just sitting in this hospital gown in this room. He made this wonderful video himself, and he's like, "Hi, Ren." It's like talking to his other self. and it starts arguing with himself. And he's looking this way, talking to himself, and then he's looking this way, the other one's talking back. And then it goes through this dialogue and it comes up to this like a fight between them. And then the guy's kind of like, it's okay. Like there's, and I'll send it to you. It's really hard to describe, but it is fascinating what this young man did. And it come out of this place of darkness that he had been through and the sickness that he made this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's so interesting those voices. I love Richard Schwartz. He has this therapeutic process which is becoming very popular now amongst therapists, which is called internal family systems. And so in Buddhism we have one mind, right? Or the monkey mind. Yeah. In internal family systems, we have many different minds, many different voices. And so these voices ultimately what they're all trying to do is protect us, right? Some are nurturing and kind, some are harsh. Yeah. And if we can tap into what each voice is saying and then ask what they want for us, we get this clarity around how our, for example, we'll use the label inner critic, how it's trying to protect us. When you can understand how it's trying to protect you and why it's trying to protect you, then you can make a choice. Whereas when there's not the understanding, it steamrolls us.
after my first NDE at 5 years old, after that, I was riding the car with my family and I seen these kids running around the yard and I jumped up and I'm in my head real loud, that's my family. And but yet there's part of me, it's like, that's ridiculous. They're in the car with your four siblings, your parents, it's not your family. But but I know it's my family. And what it was is during that drowning NDE, I was running around the yard with those kids trying to play ball. They had been outside this day that I had drowned as well. And so there they are playing ball, and it triggered that memory, but yeah, I didn't make sense of it. So my parents pulled up to my grandparents' house. The family, my parents and the four kids went in my grandparents' house. But this day, I didn't go in. I'm standing there looking, and I'm like, I remember floating in and out of them houses. And this voice is saying, you did not. I'm like, yeah, I did. And then, so after my 25-year-old NDE, months later, I see the first time ever talking about, I didn't hear the word NDE, but they were talking about near-death experiences on Oprah. And she was new back then. And I, oh my God, how crazy. And I stepped back to go to start dinner and something just like stopped me in my tracks. And that was the loudest dialogue. It was that same kind of dialogue. Of course, I didn't think of it, put it together then. It took, decades later for I like, wait a minute. This happened both times after the NDEs. So this dialogue started. It's like, that couldn't have happened. I'm like, but I know it did. Remembering my NDE and the hospital with ectopic pregnancy. And there's like, it couldn't have. Like, but it did. It couldn't have. But it did. And then everything just quieted. Like I knew it did. And so
Mm.
as I got, decades later, it's like, wait a minute. After both NDEs, I had that loud dialogue with myself at 5 and at 25, whether what I remembered, was correct or not. But it was the most loud dialogue I've ever had in my life was at these two times. And so this last several months, I've been trying to pay more attention to that dialogue instead of leaving it to my subconscious to bring it
Mm.
forward and pay attention to what's going on. What am I saying to myself? And what am I saying back? And so it really helps me keep that, I say, little evil voice in check because I stop it right now instead of letting it continue and trying to ignore it. Because I'll start cussing and stuff like, what's going on? And here's that little evil voice in there that's taken over, and I don't want that nowhere near me. So,
Yeah. Yeah, which one of the strategies there too is that that little voice, it's there. It's not going to go away if we ignore it. What happens is if we just ignore it, it goes into the subconscious, and from there it's like really whispering. Yeah, and it's harder to hear it. And so people will be like, well, I don't know why I'm so afraid to do this. Why am I procrastinating on this? And it's because it's coming from the subconscious now. So initially we could hear it, but we ignored it. And people say that all the time. Just don't listen to your negative self-talk. Just do it anyway. Whereas I think outsmarting it is to go, oh, okay, you're saying that I'm not good enough. Why am I not good enough? And so then you're bringing it into your conscious awareness. And from there, you can go, okay, I know you're trying to protect me. Thank you. Like an overprotective parent. Thank you, but I'm doing this anyway. Right? You can help me, or you can get off the boat because we're doing this.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, there's bringing in the power because we're souls in a human body. Yeah. We have a humanness. There's a function to the humanness, right? And it's to facilitate, firstly, survival, then our highest good, yeah, our highest wishes. So if I can work with my inner critic, listen to it, thank it, and then say, I'm taking the action anyway, over time, that voice is going to lose its power. If I ignore it, it's going to go into the subconscious. And from there, that's where it's going to hurt me. It's really going to hurt me because I don't know what it's saying and I don't know what it's doing to me.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder why we have this. Why do we have these two opposing voices within us? It's sometimes it can feel like a good and evil. Um, and why is it there? Why do we have to have this? And it seems like this is one's our brain and one's our soul. And our brain wants a selfishly, physical things. Well, do this and you'll make more money. Do this and you'll be popular. Do this and you'll have more respect. And then the other one's like, but you really don't want to do any of that, right? Like, don't do any of that. Don't put yourself through that, you know. And
Mm,
it's just, and so it's just there. And I don't know. But yeah, it's
yeah.
very
And
interesting
yeah,
concepts.
every material, everything in our life has a way of being worked with. And so that's, like there's a small micro course on my website, but it's about working with the inner critic. It's about those things that we just talked about. It's like, okay, how do you do that? What do you need to know? And there's tools so that people can go, oh, okay, I can hear the inner critic. I can navigate that, and I can create what I want to create more freely because I've engaged with the inner critic. And there's definitely times where it's just like, you know, being really forceful with the inner critic, saying, well, I'm doing this anyway. You can take a hike. I'm going. I'm doing this. But it's like, okay, when we can hear it, then we can create the changes.
At the very beginning of my second NDE and the bright white light before anything else happened, I remember this really small moment. And it seemed like maybe it was New York City. It's like I was at the sidewalk or thinking about this sidewalk. I don't know why, but all I could see was like people's feet and the bottom of their legs, and they're like carrying these briefcases, and it's the real fast. And I'm thinking, get out of the rat race, go enjoy nature. This isn't how God intended us to be. Like, and so part of that has always stayed with me as to don't get into working yourself to death over something when it might be better just to relax and slow down and enjoy life.
Yeah, so true. So true. That's what we're here to do is to enjoy life. And it doesn't mean it's going to be all enjoyment,
Yeah. There's a
but the
saying,
more,
to work, say, work more or want less.
hmm,
And I thought I try to remind myself, work more or want less. Like you really don't have to work that hard if you just decide to want less. So,
yeah, very true. And work can be much easier when it's an act of love. So
yeah.
there's a wonderful phrase which comes from an Indian mystic called Osho, and it is that work is love made visible. And so when our work is an act of love, it's energizing, it's more sustaining.
Yeah, I have quit every job I've ever had abruptly. There was just one day where all of a sudden, I can't do this anymore. Bye. I don't think I've ever put in a 2 weeks notice. It's like when I'm done, I'm done. And that's just it's the way it is. I'm gone.
Yeah,
I mean, and I've had bosses stand right in front of me say, "No, I beg of you to reconsider, think of all you're giving up." I'm like, "Nope, I'm done." One boss, she kept my job open for a month, because I had so much vacation and sick time, that she just kept sending my check. And she'd call me every few days, "Peggy, please come back." And I said, "What part of no don't you understand? What part of I quit don't you understand?" I ain't going back to that. So,
yeah, yeah. Which that sounds like that's honoring your heart.
yeah.
It's like, oh no, my heart is calling me elsewhere. I'm not going back.
Yeah, and I'm that way in relationships too. I can put up with so much and don't even care that I have had to put up, it's because I love this person or whatever. But the day that I'm done, I'm done.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no talking to me. I'm just done.
Mm,
So,
mm. Which is a real inner power place, right? Where like when we're done, say, okay, I don't have to justify what I'm doing.
mhm.
Yeah, like we're taught in our upbringing that we always have to justify what we're doing. And I was shocking at this. Whereas people can sense your inner power where you're just like, okay, no, I'm not doing that anymore. You
Yeah,
don't have to explain why.
right.
It's like, no, I'm not doing that because we're adults. We have this freedom of choice. We don't have to justify our things. And when we do, we actually give away our energy. Whereas, no, and people will receive that and go, ah, she's really convinced that that's what she's doing. Okay. They can try to convince you otherwise, but it's like, no, this is what I'm doing. And you don't give your power away by justifying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been very interesting. Now, you say you have a little quiz on your website people can do. You
Yes, yes.
mentioned
So it's
that.
called the free inner critic quiz. It takes about 3 minutes. They get a 20-page personalized report. It's a lot of work gone into it, and it teaches them around their inner critic structure. And also gives them their ranking for 6 aspects of their inner critic. Like we talked about the perfectionist and self-sabotage. And so the idea is they can get this document. There's strategies that they can do, and on top of that, there's the option to just get the mini course if they like, if they want more tools to be able to be free of that inner critic and create what they want in their life.
Okay, I'll put your website and things in the description.
Thank
And
you, Peggy. Very much appreciated.
well, it's nice meeting you, and it's been a very enjoyable, insightful conversation. And best of luck to you. And I'll get this sent out to you later today.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah, wonderful to be your guest. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.